predates the state of Missouri on paper by about 4 years. Christmas was an event that the French took very seriously. If you look up here, you'll see a decoration that would have been common in a lot of French households. What you're looking at represents the light of the world. The candles and the wreath play off of the symbolism of the biblical story of the birth of Jesus. The green wreath underneath the candles represents everlasting life. The red apples, the fall of man, but the white communion wafers represent redemption through Christ Jesus. Symbolism was very important to the French at this period of time, and so this would have been common in all of the households around town. As far as the store itself, you're looking at a good representation of what would have been available to the townsfolk here circa 1830. This is not what you would think of when you hear the phrase general store. Most people are thinking about their grandparents who lived in the 20th century. You will see that there are no clothing items here as far as shirts and pants go. All of the items are things that you would need for your house: glass bottles, scissors, combs, things that you couldn't make yourself but would really make your life a lot more comfortable. It was very common for wealthy families to have their family members in the merchant class. Felix Valle himself was just one of several merchants on Merchant Street, hence its name. We have a lot of items on display which represent tools that would have been commonly used, such as small game traps, axe heads, coal boxes, rake heads, and so forth. We spent about 40 years getting this house into the condition that it is, and we're very proud of it. One of the most important aspects of the economy in St. Genevieve at this time was the fur trade. Fur was a very important product that North America had to offer. The most valuable of all, the beaver pelt. Beaver was in high demand since about 1500. Believe it or not, the tall hats that you see in movies, that's not the only time when beaver was made into clothing. The Europeans wanted it more than the North Americans because they had nearly wiped their populations out. Why was beaver the medium of exchange that it was? About 1650, the Hudson Bay Company established a base of operations in Canada. They encountered several Native American tribes who had no concept of money, but they had to keep their European clientele who were supporting their venture happy. The Europeans wanted money, so they tried to find a way to bridge the gap. Beaver became the medium of exchange. Now, I need to address a misconception that some people have. Folks will say barter and trade as if they're the same thing, but really they're not. The Hudson Bay Company declared that one adult beaver pelt, this is an adult, one adult beaver pelt in prime condition represented 1 unit of base currency. Therefore, whenever you look at logbooks from the 18th and 19th centuries and it talks about 2 beaver pelts or 3 beaver pelts, they were always adults. These juveniles here would have been worth about half a pelt. So everything that you owned on the frontier, like St. Genevieve was for so long, would have been valued according to the number of beaver pelts. Everything you owned, from the clothing to your spectacles, maybe even some jewelry, it was all calculated in beaver. Another important aspect of the economy here, which directly correlates to beaver, would have been these trade blankets. This is another Hudson Bay invention. You can see that there is a big stripe on one end, but then you have these little markings. What do they symbolize? This was another way that the Hudson Bay Company tried to make economic relations with the Indians more profitable. The big stripe here is called the header, which denotes the approximate size of the blanket. But the actual value of the blanket is represented in these smaller markings here. This row represents 1 adult beaver pelt. So this blanket was only worth about 1 pelt. However, we have other blankets here. This one represents 2.5 beaver pelts. Why is this important? If you're going on a long journey and you want to have something to exchange with people you meet along the way, this was a convenient and more easily packed method than trying to carry all of your raw materials with you. But for all of the advantages that they had here, most of the people in St. Genevieve were poor subsistence farmers, and so a lot of material was bought on credit. it would usually come to the fact that they didn't have any hard money and they were just barely growing enough to survive. So what would that look like in real practice? Well, let's say that you need a new axe head. They wouldn't give you the handle with it in the 1830s. You have to make that yourself. But you need this in order to chop firewood for your family. So you don't have anything to pay with. Felix would give this to you, and he's going to let about 2 months go by. Then he's going to call in that debt. Well, even if you still didn't have anything to pay with, he would probably find work for you to do around here. He'd probably send you on an errand or have you help out one of the slaves doing work around the house, and then he would just call it even. As is the case with many frontier towns, some of the rules of urban society were bent because it was a matter of survival.
It's called a creche. It's very similar to our manger scene today. Each of these little figures, they're called santons, and they represented people from the town. The wise men are actually right over there at the moment, right past Debbie. It was the children's job to move them a little bit closer each night until they finally arrived. And of course, the baby Jesus, he's not in our creche scene just yet because he hasn't been born yet. It's also the child's job to place him as well. And would you like to hear about our sabots? We have our little wooden sabots over here, and we have carrots in the sabots. Very similar to children leaving cookies and milk for Santa today. Way back when, children would leave the carrots in the sabots for Père Noël's donkey. And Père Noël would leave them gifts of fruits and nuts in exchange. So this is a lemon tree. And this is something that they would have done back in the 1800s. The women's were maybe a little bit more expensive, so this, in a way, kind of represents their wealth a little bit. And very similar to our lemon tree, you're going to see in just a few minutes, we have an apple tree.
We also know that a lot of the folks in St. Genevieve had money, and so they were able to import goods up the river from the Louisiana region. So that was a great thing for them. This is an example of a parlor wheel, and I'm spinning prepared wool today. It took a long time to spin enough yarn to actually make a garment. The average sweater is about 2,200 yards, and if I spin all day long, I may produce about 1,000 yards, which would fill the bobbin out to here. And I would still have to wind off. This is a winding device called a niddy-noddy, and it's just very labor intensive to get enough yarn to make garments. So think in terms of having to clothe an entire family based on the amount of yarn that you could spin. And once you have the yarn, then of course you have to knit it or crochet it or give it to the weaver in order for cloth to be woven. And at that point, a pattern would have to be put on the cloth, it would be cut out and then sewn together to actually produce the garments. I have on a long gown and a chemise and a woven skirt from cotton and linen. And this outfit alone took months and months to spin the fibers for, and then I gave it to a person who actually made the costume period specific for me. This is about an 1800s costume.
French went to midnight mass and they came home to a feast that they call La Reveillon, which means the awakening. And they had whatever they probably could have afforded at the time. We have turkey, we have a meat pie, it's called a tortillere. They had sausages and bouillon, bread and cheese. And the main feature was 13 desserts, one for each of the disciples and one for Christ. We have gingerbread, and this is like a spice cake that's soaked in cane syrup. It's cane syrup cake. These are madeleines. And this is called Gâteau Saint Honoré. Saint Honoré was the patron saint of cooks and chefs. So we have that for her. And these are black walnut tarts. Sands of Normandy, that's like a shortbread cookie that has a wash and sugar over the top of that. This is an apple tart. And the rest of our 13 desserts are over here. We have a pound cake. These are French donuts that are called croque-signoles. We have pralines. We have lots of pecans in St. Genevieve, as you know. These are shortbread cookies. This is called a croque-en-bouche, which means to crunch in your mouth. They're little a cream puff container. They don't have the cream, but they're the cream puffs, and they're held together by spun candy. And when you do eat it, it does have a crunchy effect in your mouth. And the main dessert was the bûche de Noël, or the Yule log cake. The French did not have a Christmas tree. They had a Yule log that they burned in the fireplace, and this was to represent that Yule log. And we're serving some samples of our bûche de Noël, and we have cookies on the table from Saint-Louis too.
All right.